internet and have had to quickly relocate rooms. But the good news is that this isn't a particularly long session today, so we think we can still cover everything, and thank you for hanging in with us. And for those who haven't met either myself or Christine, I'm Steph. I'm a senior associate in the dispute resolution team. I've got a wide range of experience in health and safety matters, and I've had a particular focus on insurance aspects of those, particularly in Australia, which is where I qualified and where I'm from. Christine is a solicitor in the dispute resolution team. She's recently joined us from an in-house role in the energy sector, and she helps on a wide range of both contentious and non-contentious health and safety matters. So for anyone who didn't join us for the first of the Roundtable series, this is the second session. So we're following through basically the process of when an incident occurs, the internal investigation, which is what we're covering today. We're looking next session at the role of the health and safety executive. And on the 5th of September, we'll be looking at preparing for trial, all of this leading towards the mock trial on the 5th of October, which we hope you can join us for. So kicking off today, I'll hand over to Christine to do a refresher on the case study.
Hi everyone, thank you for bearing with us for the last couple of minutes. So for those of you who weren't able to join us for our first session, or those of you who'd like a little refresher on our fact pattern, throughout the whole series and into the mock trial, we're going to be following the same incident case study throughout. So in our scenario, we are a construction company, and there is an agency contractor who has attended the site of our client to work on some scaffolding. That particular person's agency didn't provide them with the lanyard because they assumed that site management would do it, and the site does not have enough lanyards available to allocate one to our person when they arrive. Despite the fact P has worked on sites for many, many years, they decide to set to work on the scaffolding without the lanyard to tether them to the framework. There's insufficient guying on the scaffolding, meaning that as everyone's working on it, the unit is shifting. When it does, P, without the lanyard to keep him attached to the framework, falls 16 feet to the ground. He loses consciousness on impact, and he suffers fractures to his collarbone and his shoulder. So in our first session, we had a quick look at what you would do in those first couple of hours after P falls. And today, Steph and I are going to walk you through how we start the internal investigation. And the first question really is, why do we need an internal investigation? And I'm sure some of the more canny members of the audience will go, well, obviously you need to investigate to find out what happened. But we want to look at the details. We want to see, was there anything that could have been done to prevent this happening? The internal investigation will help you to identify what holes there were, either within your own policies and procedures, or whether people who are working within your remit perhaps have a culture of not particularly following something. So when we look at our case study P, it is the question that we're looking at, does the site have all of the necessary health and safety procedures and policies in place? And in this instance, P, despite being really qualified, just decided not to follow them? Or will our internal investigation reveal that actually there is a culture of people not following the kind of safety standards, despite the fact the company has everything in place to kind of keep them safe? We can also look to use the investigation to help build remedial action. So if you understand how your incident happened, you can understand how to prevent that coming back again. Carrying out a really, really thorough internal investigation will allow you to demonstrate to your authorities, to your regulators, and to your staff that you have a really positive attitude to health and safety, that you're taking this incident really seriously, and particularly in circumstances where the injury might be significantly worse. At this stage, we only know that P's broken his shoulder, he's only broken his collarbone. I say only, they're still terrible, but it could be a lot worse. In a scenario where we have something far more serious, workers looking around and seeing that the people at the top are stopping, taking stock, taking this really seriously, and not just brushing it under the carpet or pretending it doesn't matter, has a huge impact for your worker morale. The investigation will also help you to understand what other risks there are in the business and what your exposure to those risks may be. And then obviously from our perspective, having external legal counsel support you with that can offer you some additional protections through the recommendations we were able to give based on our subject matter expertise, but really importantly through the protections that legal privilege can give to you. When we start to investigate, when we start to provide you advice, you just have that extra little layer of protection.
So turning now to the stages of the investigation, one of the very first questions you need to ask yourself is who is going to lead the investigation, and of course, do they have appropriate training? So that's a bit of a circumstantial question as well. The second thing that we would say to do very early on is to engage legal counsel. We would say right from the outset, actually, to make sure that you get all the benefits from privilege, and as well as from our expertise of gathering evidence quickly. The questions you would be asking yourself for the investigation are what happened, when, where, why. To answer those questions, to form your investigation, you would need to collect the evidence. So that involves speaking to witnesses. You might need to be doing some inspections of machinery, of plant equipment, all of those types of things. And that again is where it's really important to think about who's leading the investigation and whether they've got the right training to be asking those questions and actually spotting the right answers within the evidence gathering stage. Once you have all your evidence, you're then analysing it. You're thinking about, is there an underlying issue here? So as Christine mentioned earlier, is it that you don't have a policy or procedure in place, or that you do, but there's a culture where that policy is perhaps not followed quite the way that it should? You need to think about whether or not there is a trend. When you're looking at this as well, you've got to look not just within your own company, but also within the industry at large. So is this something that's affecting just you, or is this perhaps an industry-wide problem as well? You need to have a think about whether you would need any specialist engagements. So whether you would need to perhaps speak with engineers or someone who has a particular expertise in the type of equipment that's involved, so that they can advise whether or not there's any defects you need to be aware of. And the other thing that's quite important is to have good worker consultation and involvement. Not only because it helps with morale, taking safety really seriously is very important culturally, but they actually will be the people who can tell you if there is something you need to know about what's a common practice that you might not otherwise be aware of as well. And the thing that's probably quite obvious and perhaps goes without saying, but will be said anyway, is to make sure that you're keeping really good records of the investigation. On the more serious ends of incidents, it's obviously quite a stressful environment, so making sure that you've got the good records to turn back to as you're analysing what's happened is really important as well.
So coming back to the role of external legal counsel and what your external lawyers can support you with in terms of the internal investigation. We mentioned in one of the previous slides that the first thing is that you will gain some protection through the legal professional privilege. But also one of the benefits is actually it allows you to have a really objective investigation. We are coming in with somebody who's separate to you, we're separate to your business, and we can approach this as a purely fact-finding mission. What happened? What do we think led to it happening? What documents are available? What do we still need? And it just gives you that sort of step back and allows somebody with a clearer head who's not as close to the incident to be able to work for you and to be able to work with the people who are in your organisation. We have got the expertise in interviewing witnesses, and across our team there's so much experience in working with people who have been particularly distressed if it's quite a serious incident, or if it's something that's serious but not necessarily injury generating. There's also experience within our team of how you can speak to those people and how you can kind of work with the colleagues and elicit the information you need without it feeling like anyone is kind of pointing fingers or laying blame. We can also act as just a little bit of a buffer between you and your investigating authority. Sometimes you just need to be able to take a step back. And to be honest, if there's things that you can put on our desk, like speaking to the health and safety executive, that's an hour in our day that frees up an hour in your day when you're already busy and panicked and working out how you can deal with this. Like this is what we're here for at the end of the day, to pick up those tasks and give you the space and the headspace to be able to do things. This is our subject matter kind of expertise area. Also, we can appreciate that when incidents happen, there's going to be a range of emotions, and there's potentially going to be a range of traumas being experienced by people in the company. And again, because we're not part of your organization, we're here to help you. We can kind of come in and be a calming influence and help people who are kind of really emotional to get some of the information out that they need to. And sort of, it sounds very legally to be like, we're creating a safe space, but it very much just creates an environment where the people who need to share information and give us some evidence can do that, and not kind of feel any discomfort that they might be getting someone into trouble, or they don't feel like they want to say this, or they're too upset to say it to someone they work with every day. And then a sort of secondary twofold benefit that comes from having us support you is that we become so close to all of your documents and all your procedures, become so familiar with everything that's in there. If it is a situation where there were holes in the policies or there were gaps and little cracks that someone fell through, all the way through, because we're becoming familiar with your documents, we can start to build an improvement process and help you consider how you can kind of bootstrap all those procedures and move forward to prevent this from happening again.
So turning to some of the benefits and actions that we do along the way when we're engaged with these internal investigations, I think first and foremost, and the most important to everyone, is the benefit of privilege. So the conversations that we are having, the work product that we're creating, the analysis we're doing, the evidence gathering, we're really able to shield that. So it just gives you a little bit of breathing space while we're sort of preparing a picture of what we think has happened, to just have that protected. When we say that we're protecting things by legal privilege, it doesn't mean that you can't ever reveal it. You do have the ability to waive privilege as and when you need to down the track. So don't think of that as a just one and done. It's something that you can revisit as you need to. If there's particular documents that you do want to show to other people, that can still be done. So we're very skilled in advising both in terms of the law, but also from practicalities, to look at minimising the risks that can arise from the incident. So although we of course will be analysing policies and procedures, and as Christine said, we make recommendations along the way of where we think you might have a gap, we'll also have a look at the practicalities and what we think will benefit you as well. So think of it more as a two-pronged exercise. We're looking at what happened, but we're also looking at what can be improved. So that's a big mitigation area as well. If you're looking at potentially penalties at the end of this, showing that you have engaged someone with expertise in this field and are taking it really seriously is a big deal. It goes a long way to showing what your attitude is to making sure that these incidents don't happen again. It's also a good morale booster for the employees. Obviously, it's a pretty tough time on sites when there's been an incident. And again, just doing what you can to show that it's being taken seriously, it's being investigated, any recommendations being implemented, all of these things, they're quite important within the workforce. And then, as we've said, it's a good opportunity for a review, making sure things are up to scratch. So looking also at mitigation, it's sort of, this is the bit where we sound like the hard lawyers of giving you the kind of less compassionate aspect to incidents. But obviously there are potential consequences that flow from it, that companies, of course you're going to be worried about the worker, but there's other realities for companies as well that flow from these things. So, you show that it's taken seriously. It sounds a bit harsh, but what happens on day one of an incident will inform what happens at a hearing if it goes to that stage. So we can be there to also make sure that you're doing everything as best as you possibly can in the circumstances, including, again, this is more of a practical rather than a legal thing, but how are you treating the families of the worker that has been involved and the worker themselves? It's one of those ones where it sounds maybe a bit soulless, but in the example where there's been a fatality, continuing to pay that worker, it will go a long way. So we can tell you about things like that. That all will inform your penalties as well. So having a look at what you've actually done post the incident, it's all taken into account. We can tell you as part of the investigation what the immediate actions you would need to take to show that you're doing, you know, as best as you possibly can, and also looking towards prevention are all really important. And the other thing that companies need to think about as well is not just looking from a regulation point of view from the incident and looking after the direct worker themselves, but you need to be able to be thinking about what other potential actions could flow on from this. Are there going to be any third-party claims that could arise? You know, do you need to be thinking about contractual disputes? There's, you know, lots of other elements to this outside of sort of direct worker involvement. We can just be there to flag to you what they are, what we think they could be, even to the extent of, do you need to be looking at actions with other people, like suppliers, contractors, all sorts of things we can help with on the front.
And so kind of coming back to our case study when we're looking at the third-party claims, obviously P, who got injured, isn't our employee. He's not our guy. So when Steph mentions contractual arrangements and what's going on, we need to be looking at what relationships we have with his agency. Is his agency going to be looking to bring a claim against us for what happened? So things that on the face of it seem really straightforward, when you really sort of start to interrogate it and think about how the kind of circles come outwards, there is a lot that could come up. And having us around to help you kind of risk assess that and work out how to address it.
Yeah. It's another one of those things that sounds potentially a bit harsh, but you don't want to be caught off guard on those type of things as well. I think it's quite easy in an incident to be so swept up in the main event that actually you're not looking at the entire picture at that stage, and because we come in objective, we just are able to take a broader view at things perhaps. So the sort of key takeaways that we want you all to take away from this session are thinking about, first of all, who has responsibility for undertaking these investigations, and again, thinking about their training, their level of expertise. Are they the right people for the job? Do you need to engage a lawyer? Treat them as a very high priority. So as we said, what happens on day one is going to inform what happens throughout. So get in early, put your best foot forward, even though it's obviously a stressful situation. Treating an investigation as a high priority is really important. The other thing that's really important about treating them as a high priority is for the evidence gathering stage, you want to be doing that while memories are fresh, particularly for witness interviewing. Engage your legal counsel for the shield of privilege, but also for their expertise. Make sure that you treat the worker or the worker's family with care throughout, and then make sure that you are also implementing learnings following the investigation as well.
So because we had a very last minute spicy room swap, we cannot see your chat box or your question box. So we would like to, at this point, ask anyone who may have already asked a question or is sitting there with a question burning inside them, if you just want to take yourself off mute and fire them into the room, that's probably going to be kind of the most efficient way for us to do this. And I'm so sorry.
I think either no questions or they don't want to unmute,
the silence,
which is also fine.
The silence just means that Steph and I and our whistle stop tour have covered everything you could possibly ever need to know about investigations. Obviously, if anybody does have a question that they'd like to ask offline, at the end of the slides, we're going to have our email addresses. So you can drop a message to myself, you can drop a message to Steph or to Andrew, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. And is the one with all the best war stories that we were hoping could have been shared with you today. So as Steph mentioned right at the top of the session today, this is stage 2 of 4 stages of webinars and 1 mock trial. So we'll be back same time next month, same day, to look at the role of the health and safety executive and what their powers of investigations are, what their investigation will look like, as opposed to the internal investigation process that we've just undertaken. The use of PACE for witness statements and for witness interviews, the sanctions that are available to the HSE and the actions that they can take. And that will be the springboard to preparing for any final prosecution. Also coming up in the next few weeks is the launch of the Field Fisher Health and Safety podcast, which is being headed up by Andrew Sanderson and by one of our team, Kieran, who isn't with us today. So throughout this, we are going to be talking to a range of practitioners and interesting people in health and safety with different perspectives and different dynamics. And we're hoping in the next couple of weeks that the first one will be live, and we will share the details of that as soon as possible. As always, there's lots of knowledge and information on our Inspector Calls blog website on Field Fisher. So if you aren't familiar with where that is, if you head onto the fieldfisher.com website, look for sectors health and safety, it will take you through. Andrew's recently posted a new piece of information about directors' duties, and there's all sorts of bits and pieces on there that will be helpful, including post interviews. And if not, this is the London Health and Safety team. It's been great to have you all here. We are so sorry it took us a while to actually get to you. But if anyone has any questions, as I say, please do feel free to email any of us in, or if you'd like to ask them now while you've still got a few minutes, we'd love to hear them. Any questions? Okay, well, in that case, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Have a great bank holiday weekend, everyone. And we will see you in a month's time for the next installment.